welcome back to the Stay Spicy podcast. So we're going to talk about values today. And you know, this whole season has been about leadership and how do you show up authentically as a leader if you do not know your values. So today we're going to run through a values exercise. I'm going to be a guinea pig and I'm a little bit nervous about it, but it's something you have to do on a regular basis. So what is a value? So, you know, your values is something that you believe in to your core. It's something that stands with you. It's something that's important to you, and it's how you show yourself to the world, whether that's your career, your community, no matter what that is. So we get a lot of flack for not fitting in sometimes when it comes to values, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to working for companies. But, you know, why would you want to fit into a specific corporate value or organization value? The point is to bring your values forward and live your authentic self. And that's what staying spicy is all about. So, Lynette, what do you think about this? What do you think about values? What are your thoughts today?
Well, I mean, yeah, values are, I think, the most important aspect of leadership. And in our next episode, we'll actually talk to somebody about how you live your values once you've figured them out. But we thought it would be great to first walk people through how would you go about figuring out what your values are if you haven't done that before. And it starts with what is a value. So you're absolutely right. Like, values are core to who you are. And that's why it's important to know them and to use them as your guiding light, essentially. It's how you make decisions, how you filter things through. It's helps you know what to say yes to, but I think more importantly, what to say no to. And as an entrepreneur, just before I launched my business, a new entrepreneur, I did kind of a values refresh for myself because a lot had happened in my life, and before I kind of set out to put myself out there in this new way, I wanted to get really grounded in what's core to who I am and what's important to me. And now looking back on that, I'm so glad I did that. I think it's the most important thing I could have done for myself because it gave me that criteria, that litmus test of what clients to work with and what clients I decide are not for me. And, you know, also living your values helps other people either opt in or out of you if there's alignment or not on their part. So, actually, it's ironic because I was realizing I wore our I have a no assholes policy shirt today, and that is on some level one of my values, one of my criteria when I go and think about, and I've talked about this before, you know, whether or not I'm going to work with someone. It's not just are they an asshole or not, but also the flip side of that is I want to work with good people doing good things. And so it's really important to be able to articulate that. And I think where people often go wrong is they get those lists, those sheets full of words, of values words, and then they just go and kind of pick ones. But when you do it that way, you should all over yourself usually, because you go through and you go, well, what values should I have? And I did that years ago when I was in one of my first executive positions. I thought, here's the values a leader should have. And I didn't stop to think about, well, what are my actual core values? Because if you're doing that, it's not going to be authentic to you. And the other part of that too is it's really important to define them because a word means something different to everybody. You know, for example, innovation means something different to me as it would to you.
Yeah, and I think the whole idea around this that I think, you know, some people struggle with is that this is not a standardized process. There is no standardization when it comes to values. Whether you're an entrepreneur or you work in a company or you're starting your own business or you're volunteering, whatever the case may be, you need to do this. This is a conversation with yourself, right? And sometimes we don't stop and reflect about what are my values. And it's really important to do a values exercise because that's going to be sort of a guiding light on how you move forward. So, you know, we work with a lot of clients. Stay Spicy. We don't just do podcasting. I'm just going to plug us here for a second, but we also help people with value propositions, values exercises, brand journeys, all of those things. And we do talk to a lot of women about, I know what I'm about. I know who I am, but I just need to sit and reflect. I need a little bit of help. And then I want to kind of package that up and present myself. So we always start with values. And that's something that Lynette and I say, you can have a kick-ass LinkedIn, you can have all kinds of contact, you can have a logo, a brand, all of the things, but we always have to start somewhere, and it always has to start with a values exercise and really diving into who are you, what's your origin story, what are the things that light you up, what are the things that piss you off, like whatever the case may be. So like you said, you can take whatever you want and take it to the next level. And in entrepreneurship, there's been so many conversations around, it's not about money anymore. It's about, creating a mutually beneficial relationship with clients, doing great work, feeling good about the work that you do. And I think that you can't do that if you don't know your values, and you can't do that if your values don't align with your clients. So I'm glad that there's been more conversation about that, as opposed to just take all the clients, do all the stuff.
Yeah. Well, and when I think about, the clients that I work with, and I get excited to work with them, I am having fun. And I think it's because there's values alignment between myself and the client. That doesn't mean that we have the same values, because like you said, values are unique to you, but it's that our values have synergy. They have alignment. They're not at odds with each other. And that's when the magic happens.
Right.
And same, not just with entrepreneurs and clients, same thing goes for teams.
Right.
Teams and their leaders, their values have to be aligned. Otherwise, that's when you start to see people feeling awful, being miserable. There's this feeling that something is off.
Right.
And you can't quite put your finger on it. Or you start to experience, mental health symptoms and physical symptoms. Most often, there's a values misalignment between you and the workplace, or between you and essentially you and your leader. Because the workplace doesn't necessarily have values. The workplace values are a collection of the people's values. And that's another conversation I've had with some leaders that I've worked with, is your brand as a corporation or a company and your values as a company. It's not what you put on paper. It's actually the people. It's a product of what the people that work in the organization and the lived values that they practice. So that's a whole other conversation, but it's important to consider that when you're part of an organization and when you do those values exercises as a company. We're talking about, for a person or a leader, but when you do them as a company, it's not about what you write down on paper. It's important actually I would start with, what are the values collectively of our team?
Right.
As opposed to, what are our aspirational values as a company? Because that's just words on a paper.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also important for people to understand, when they do enter a company, saying they're coming from the outside, what are the lived values of this company, as opposed to just,
stated values.
The stated vision, mission values.
Yep. I've talked a lot about stated values versus lived values with
lived
companies
values
too.
Yeah.
Yep. Because again, that's also about a level of self-awareness
right.
for the organization and the leaders in it. And so when we talk about values, it's not just preferences, and it's not just things you kind of like, or things that you have a preference for. It goes a lot deeper than that, because values are core to who you are.
Right.
And so I don't, if people listened to season 1, they'll recognize the term deep creep questions.
I love it when you say that. Yeah.
Creep real deep.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly it. If in order to figure out your values, you have to creep real deep.
Right.
Get in there. So that's what we're going to show people how to do today. We're going to walk Sheri through, as she said, a values exercise. And we'll walk you through the steps so that you can either do this along with listening to the episode or after the fact, or you can ask someone to help you with it as well. Because sometimes I find it easier to have somebody ask me questions and me talk it out than just sit there and write it out myself.
Right.
And sometimes when we just write it out, again, we shit on ourselves, or we or we just recite the surface level stories that we tell ourselves. And one of the people that I've been working with in coaching, we talked about that, where there are stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, and they come from something that happened along the way, and they may not be who we are. They're sort of our perception based on what someone else said to us or what something that happened. So it helps for somebody to kind of watch your face, your micro expressions, kind of double click on certain things and say, tell me more about that. Tell me why, describe it, which is something you wouldn't do for yourself if you were writing it out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this is a good use. This is a good use of personal time for yourself. And we always talk about investing in ourselves. And I think that even if you're taking a half hour or an hour to do a bit of a values exercise, writing some stuff down, typing some stuff out just to get you started. So we are going to kick off a bit with a values exercise. So unless you're driving, you might want to grab a notebook and a pen. We're going to get started, and Lynette's going to lead a bit of this, and I'm going to answer some questions.
Some deep creek questions.
Yeah, some deep creek questions.
I'm creeping real deep.
So whether that's opening a Word tab or grabbing a notebook, a stylus, whatever your writing tool of choice. So basically how we do this is you open up your book, you have 2 blank pages. Left hand on the top, you write gives. So this is what gives you energy. And then on the other side, you write takes. That's on the right-hand side.
Yep.
So we have 2 columns. We're going to discuss that. So in true Stay Spicy fashion, I didn't really plan for this. So I'm just going to let Lynette guide me through the process, and we're going to show you guys how it's done.
So as I mentioned, in the gives column, this is going to be things that give you energy, but not necessarily just things you like coffee. And not things that falsely give you energy either.
Right.
These are things that, we can call them fuck yeah moments where, anytime something like this happens or you get to do something or you spend time with a person like this, you just feel lit up inside. And then on the takes column, things that take your energy, again, are not just things that annoy you generally, but things that really make you feel like they've sucked the life out of you.
Right.
And some people find it easier to start with the things that take energy. And it's no commentary on people, but sometimes it's just depending on where we're at, or it's easier for us to think about things that just really grind our gears. And so you can start there and then start to weave your way into the gives column, or you can kind of go all over the place. So Sheri, I'm going to give kind of dealer's choice to you and tell me about some things that either give or take energy from you.
Okay, so we'll start with the takes energy away from me because I noticed that the ones that give me energy are pretty much like the opposite of those. So
that often is the case.
Yeah.
I will say, and that's why you do both, because if some people find it easier to do the takes, and I won't spoil it, but afterwards we'll show you how to kind of reverse engineer values from that too.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so drains. The first one, the big one for me is emotion with no action.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is I'm okay with venting. I'm okay with people being upset about things. I'm okay with those things. But I'm a firm believer that if you feel strongly about something, you should do something about it. So when I see the lack of that, I don't like it. It takes energy away from me. I get frustrated. We live in a world where there's a lot of that. There's a lot of opinions with no action. There's a lot of people who think, saying that this should be done is a substitute for doing it. There's anyone can point out something wrong. It doesn't take a lot of talent to point out negative things. It takes a lot of guts to do something about it. So I think about Michelle Obama talking about, when they go low, we go high. I always loved that about her because, she talks about how there's a lot of injustice in the world. And, going high means doing something about it. It means using your power in whatever way you have to make something happen. So bitching without doing something about it, or there being like a reason for it, it sucks the life out of me. And sometimes I catch myself doing it too. All right. Time wasters. I don't enjoy wasting time. I don't enjoy things that waste my time.
What about that really gets to you?
I think for me, I'm a pretty scheduled person, and I like to bring all of myself to a situation. So if it's a client or a family member or a friend or whatever, and they're like, I'm meeting with them for a set amount of time, I have like a date with them or whatever the case is, not something that just goes off into the evening or whatever, like a concert or something. But say, for example, I have a half-hour meeting with a client. I bring a 10 to those meetings. Like I show up, I bring all of my strategy, my thought, my feelings. I'm prepared to give them all of my energy for that set amount of time. And when it starts to run over or it starts to become a waste of time or there's no like clear agenda, it drains my energy because I'm not able to focus my energy on something that's really useful. So meetings for me are huge time wasters if they don't have a purpose, I guess, as an example. And as things start to run really late, I find that I'm not able to give it the same amount of energy that I was willing to commit to it. So I like to bring my all to things. I don't like to show up as a 6. I like to show up as a 9 or a 10 with everything that I do.
'Cause you are a 10.
Thank you very much.
And so how would you describe somebody who wastes time, like the behavior of wasting time? What are some words you'd use to describe?
Indecisiveness. Somebody that doesn't know what they want. Somebody that's not clear on what they need from me. Unless they're asking for my help, but in that case, it's clear that they need my help. So things like that. I don't like to sit and kind of muse about things and talk about things, but then there not be like a takeaway, I guess, because I like to involve myself. So to me, like going into a situation, giving it my all, and then being able to leave and do something with it is like preferred for me. I'm not like mad at the people or anything. It just drains my energy a little bit because I like to have charged batteries, and as I do as an extrovert, when you give a lot to people, you also need like a little bit of that time and space to recharge so you can continue to, give the energy and live yourself and live your best life.
What else is there?
Cyclical, I put.
Okay.
So
that's going to require some definition.
yeah, things that go
this
around
another-
in circles.
Okay, this is another takes energy.
Another drain,
Okay.
yes.
Cyclical. Okay.
Yeah, so when things are cyclical and they don't lead anywhere, so people are chasing their tails, they're running around, or you are dealing with a situation where you're running into the same issue every time and it's not getting solved. I get very frustrated with that. I like to reach goals. I like to find the answers. I'm very curious about how we get to a point where problems are solved. So, I guess that kind of relates to emotion with no action. It's the idea that we're just kind of bitching about the same things over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be anything. So, sometimes, you feel like you see the same situation over and over and over again. That deja vu, it drains me.
Okay. What about some things that light you up?
Optimism really lights me up. I love the idea that you can overcome anything. And I truly believe, and I say this all the time, there's a solution, and you just have to find it. And I love the challenge of that. I love learning more about people because I like to see the best in people. So optimism to me is like, they say, optimists aren't necessarily right, but they're happier and more successful. I just believe optimism is the key to living a good life. You have to look at the positive, and you can still be a realist and do that, I think. I think optimism's important. So optimism is like huge to me. Duality is something that gives me energy. So it's the idea that you can be free in different ways. So, you can be masculine, you can be feminine. Maybe this is the true Gemini in me, but you can bring whatever energy you're feeling like that day. And it's like the ultimate expression of how you feel. Expression being another massive value of mine. So I like, one day I'm wearing a heavy metal shirt and I'm listening to Metallica, and the next day I'm, dusting off my Hello Kitty collection. The idea that you can...
By the way, this is absolutely true of her. She is a massive Hello Kitty fan and hard rock fan. We share the hard rock thing in common, not the Hello Kitty thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of conversation around this, right? It's you can exist in many different spaces, and that is something that I think gives me energy. The fact that I can wake up in the morning and express myself however I want, and sometimes I'm a completely different person almost on a Monday than I am today on a Friday. I came in here and I said, I'm going to get my, saving my fucks for magical shit.
Yeah. I think, what did you say?
Mug.
You said it like it's a sweary day or...
It's a sweary day.
Something
yeah.
like that. She's like, I needed the most sweary mug we have because that's what I'm feeling today.
I was listening to Ozzy on the way down. And I was at the Sunset Strip last week. I was at, the Rainbow Bar, and I was just feeling the rock and roll masculine energy. Maybe I'm bringing that today.
And we were at this concert, a hard rock concert.
Yes.
It's like a whole vibe right now.
Totally. So duality to me, like being able to just express yourself however you're doing and feeling, I love it. I think the world needs more of it. So those are my positives, the things that give me the energy. You can see I'm getting excited talking about it. I'm a different person now than I was talking about the drains.
Yes, and that's important too. Like even
Right.
just paying, if you're doing this exercise for someone, or even if you're just doing it yourself, it might even be good instead of writing to record yourself talking about it, because our voice changes, our face changes when we talk about authentic values, right? And so that's how you can really know when you've hit the mark. And so when I'm doing this exercise with a person, they'll say a thing, and if I don't feel like I've hit that like money moment of lighting them up, then I'll like dig a little deeper. Tell me more. Tell me why. Give me some examples, and then because sometimes it's a variation on that. That's their real excitement.
Yeah.
So then if you're taking notes, also make a note of, like make a little star or make a little circle of what, as you're noting, what they say when they light up like that.
Yeah. A lot of feelings with these words.
Yeah.
Eh?
All right. Anything else on either side?
Well, I think I said expression, sharing, variety. I think that all kind of ties into the idea of duality, optimism, those types of things.
Can you give me an example, like a story or an example of any one of these, just to kind of further illustrate it beyond kind of the abstract?
Yeah.
Something that's happened that shows us.
I think optimism for me has always been something in my personal life that has helped me move on to another phase. So it's kind of like my religion, So growing up, I was always adventurous and optimistic. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s in a mining town in northeastern Canada, in Newfoundland, Labrador. And it was a very adventurous place. And if you want to go right back to origin story, this is a place where, we explored outside. We were constantly learning by doing. We were expressing ourselves. I was a tomboy, and then I was also a figure skater. So you see that duality. We were allowed in my family to experience anything without labels, which I really enjoyed. And it was a place where people came from all over the world and all over Canada to work in the mining industry. So it was a really different place. It was also very isolated. So I knew that adventurous quality in me, that optimism. I was always looking forward in a positive way. So what was the future going to look like? I was going to go away and go to school. What does that look like? So, when you go through all the different stages of my life, the only thing that has hauled me out of hard times is the optimism that the next adventure is right around the corner. And I carried that through my life, and I'm always going to carry that through my life. So like you, Lynette, I've lived across Canada. So I never kind of stuck around to dwell. And that goes back to this emotion without action, right? That's something that would immediately drain energy from me. Always taking action based on the positives and the positive feelings. So whether that was going to university in New Brunswick, packing up my bags and moving to Toronto in December or summer, and then moving to the prairies in January. You have to be really optimistic to move to the prairies in January. But
or just
my
not
journey,
even paying attention to the weather app.
Absolutely. So that's I carry that journey with me, and the reason, and that's an example of my optimism in action and my discipline in action. So this curiosity, adventure, it's all related to optimism. And my interest in telling stories, my interest in what's next. Don't look back.
Yes.
Right? Don't look back.
So the next step, once you've got kind of notes down, and I was doing this as we go, but you can do this after, because I do this a lot with people, so I can kind of multitask on this, is I go through and I pick out themes. And so you'll start to see, and we did kind of an abbreviated version. You may want to do this over the course of like a half an hour, or something like that, and get kind of lots of content. Then you'll start to see themes pop out. And then I just sort of, I separate them. So I think for me, there's 3 themes that have popped out on both sides, interestingly. So like you said, on the gives and the takes. The first one would be solutions. Actually, there might be more than 3. So something around solutions. You actually said that word, I think, multiple times on both sides. And this is why it's great for you to just talk, because you won't realize.
No, I didn't even hear myself saying it.
Yeah, I think it counted about 5 times you said solutions.
Okay.
And there are ways you can say a word without saying the word too, right? So when you talked about emotion without action, you were talking about the lack of solutions, right? That people who don't seek out solutions. And at first I had wrote down personal accountability and responsibility, but the more you talked, the more I was like, oh no, it's actually about people who are pessimistic and not looking for a solution. And then on the flip side, you started talking about the ability to overcome anything, and that there's always a solution. And so those two have a lot of synergy. And so solutions came forward quite consistently in here. So that's one of them. The next one is, and I think that's also connected to the time wasters piece, because you talked more about focus and purpose. And so that could be a separate one. It could be connected to solutions. It just depends on how you define it. Solutions being driving to a result, driving to a purpose. Mm-hmm. So the next one actually, I think, is something around decisiveness, initiative, action, things like that. So we talk very consistently about valuing people who will take initiative, people and not loving indecisiveness. Same thing with these time waster meetings. It's this kind of wishy-washy lack of focus, decisions, that kind of thing. So I think something around initiative, maybe even just decisiveness is a value of yours. Solutions.
Purpose, right?
And purpose.
Yeah.
Solutions, maybe the decisiveness is purpose, and that's how you define it, is that purpose for you means heading in a direction, being decisive. And so I'm just going to write down solutions, purpose. And then the next one, actually, so you talked about duality, but I think it's closer to freedom, or authenticity. Those are 2 words I think that kind of bring this around. So I wrote down unencumbered authenticity
Right.
You can make up your own value words too. You don't have to stick to like a word. And then I put kind of freedom of expression and identity. But definitely I got this vibe from as you were talking about these adventurous pieces, learning by doing. It's just this sense of being free to do it your way and find your way and be who you want to be and need to be in the moment. And to me, the common word there is something like freedom, or authenticity, or some combination of the two. And how you define that is the freedom to be adventurous, optimistic, and find your way, whatever that looks like. Optimism, I certainly could be a fourth one, because that I wasn't sure it would be, and then it does come up in a different way than the others. So in a quick and dirty values exercise way, 4 words that came pretty prominently for Sheri would be solutions, purpose, freedom, and optimism. Now she can pick different words, and she can go through a list of values words and then pick words that are like that but maybe resonate more. And then what you would do is you take the notes from this exercise and use these details to then define those words. So that's a really important part of this, is not just picking the words, but actually defining them in a sentence or two of what does that mean for you and what does that look like? And that's the next step to it. So on our website, we will post our own values and value definitions so that you can see an example of what that looks like as a follow-up. But this is an exercise that anyone can do, really. And then I would encourage people to do more than once. And anytime there's a big life change, especially, that's when your values can change. Because we talked last season about changes and how big life changes, like a move, the end of a relationship, changing jobs, health, big health changes in life, things like that, having a child, those are big changes that can change the way you see yourself and the world around you.
Absolutely. And I think, I remember meeting with a coach. She was amazing. I was just so blessed to meet with her. And, at that point in my career, this is before I started my business, which I had to do another values exercise after I started my business. I remember turning down a job that I would have killed for 5 years before. And I was so confused. And she said to me, it sounds like your values have changed. And this isn't sitting with you right now, and this isn't who you are right now. And I just thought I had a path for my life. And like it was the path, and I was just going to follow that path. And she's like, no, that's not who you are right now. And so that was my first introduction to values exercises. I had to do it again when I started my business, and again when we started this podcast, season 1. And now I'm doing it again, and even thinking about it this morning as I'm talking, I'm a lot clearer on the things I absolutely do not like, the things I absolutely love. It's very black and white for me now, and I'm very open to anything that shares my values, or anyone that has values that, mesh with mine. So I want to ask you then, because you talked about doing your values exercise, a few years ago when you started your business. Have they changed? Like, and knowing that you haven't finalized from this exercise, but just from what came up today, did you notice a change? Yeah, I did notice a change, because it wasn't until I started my business, and the duality one, I think, and the expression. I've always been an optimist. Obviously that's like a core thing that's happened throughout my life, but I've started to the personal expression piece, and we talked about this before we started recording. When I went off on my own and became a consultant, and at first I was just selling services. I was like, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to be this, I need to be that. When I dropped all that and said, you know what, I'm just going to show up as myself, and people are going to find those values and work with me. That's when I started expressing myself and seeing that as a more important and integral part of who I am now. As someone who can freely express themselves, walk into a room, wear whatever they want, say what they want. And that's how I've built relationships. So I unlocked that a only recently. That's something I unlocked after. I realized as a child, and, and we always say, think back before people got in your head. I have always been a champion of that expression. But I think, trying to make money, being a young professional, you get lost in some of the corporate stuff. And I did get lost in it. I was moving a lot. So I was trying to fit in wherever I went. And so I think unlocking that expression just like breathed new life into me. And I have really been able to reach new highs and get new success. So that is something that's new. So I do recommend doing this like whenever there's a big life change, or maybe even once a year. It's your home at Christmas. It's your New Year's resolution is to just spend some time. And spend some time with yourself. So that has definitely changed. So there's been some changes for sure.
And then speaking of values alignment, so my values, I did this maybe a few years ago as well. And the ones that have stayed consistent for me, I haven't done the total refresh yet, but they, so I'd say like freedom, on authenticity and compassion are 3 of my values. But then I added recently fun to it because that is it's just so important for me in life and to build the life that I want. And so when you think about the synergy between my values the words aren't exactly the same as Sheri's, but there is alignment there, right? Optimism and fun. There's an adventure.
Absolutely.
There's similarity there. Freedom and autonomy and authenticity, all of that. There's a lot of synergy there, which is why Sheri and I just jive. And then in a future episode, we're going to talk about styles, which is different than values, and how styles can align or not, and how you work through different styles. I think you can work through different styles. You can't work through different values.
Right.
Values have to be aligned. So that wraps up part 1 of this episode. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will talk to Gavin John about the importance of and how to live your values. And that is going to be a fascinating conversation. And so check out our website as well for more details on values exercises, and be sure to tune in. And in the meantime, of course, stay spicy, friends.
Stay spicy. Thanks for listening to the Stay Spicy podcast.
We love hearing from our listeners and want you to be part of our community. So connect with us on social media at Stay Spicy Inc.
And visit us online at stayspicy.ca.